Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 Quick Match gameplay. This time around we are doing a little bit of a Lizardmen against the Dawi gameplay. So my opponent did decide to do the good old tactical box strat, so we're going to be seeing if we can bust it open and kind of crack his defenses. For my lord this time around, I'd have brought the mighty Lord Mazdamundi, and Mazdamundi is one of those lords you won't see very often. He's very expensive. He's not particularly great in melee. He does have a reasonable selection of spells though, and he definitely has some pretty cool abilities, so I definitely want to give him a shot, especially because the dwarves, who of course I don't really feel pressured to bring a high mobility lord or a sort of anti-large lord like Crockguard and Grimlock. So Mazdamundi, of course, does have decent armor. He's got a bonus against infantry, so his pitiful melee attack actually isn't that bad when fighting against melee lords like what the dwarves tend to bring. And he does have a nice little mix of spells here. He does, of course, have Greater Arcane Conduit, which means that he has a lot of Winds of Magic. I did bring the Sunburst Standard of Hexodal on him, which gives +9 melee defense to him and nearby units, and also provides 12% missile resistance, which could be very, very useful when dealing with dwarf shooting. He also does, of course, get Cold-Blooded. I did bring the Net of a Mintok on him, Curse of the Midnight Wind for that fancy debuff, and Apotheosis for the heals. He also does get 2 free casts of Banishment, as well as 2 free casts of Ruination of Cities, which is a unique wind spell that just fires off in random directions, which unfortunately makes it a little unreliable, or actually very unreliable, but nonetheless, pretty cool ability. I wanted to give him a shot here. I didn't bring any heroes, which is definitely rare for Lizardmen. Instead, I did bring a Bastellodon with a Purification Crystal just to get a little bit extra healing. And I couldn't quite get that big of a front line, so what I ended up doing is a mix of Star Warriors and Shields, kind of anchoring the center, backed by Skink Cohorts on the flanks, who are backed by Kroxigors. And of course, Kroxigors should perform fairly well against dwarves, unless they have to deal with Thunderers, because they do have some very high armor. They have 100 armor. And they also do have a bonus of infantry of 18, so they're, once again, the melee stats are a bit misleading there. Out on the flanks, I do have 2 units of Chameleon Skinks. Chameleon Skinks might not seem like the unit to take against dwarves because they don't have much armor piercing, and dwarves tend to have very high armor and shields and all that sort of stuff. But I do want to use them to shut down enemy slayers and kind of poke away at enemy shooting if they have rangers or cannons or that sort of stuff. Finally, in the very back, I do have 2 units of Horned Ones, and this is probably one of the few times you will ever see these guys make an appearance on this channel. I'm not a big fan of units that have the Rampage mechanic, and I do feel that most of the cavalry is kind of, with Rampage, is kind of overpriced for what they do. Nonetheless, Horned Ones are pretty cool. They have actually, let's kind of look at their stats. You can see their stats are actually pretty monstrous. They've got 40 melee attack, 26 melee defense, which isn't terrible for Cav, 52 weapons strength, armor piercing, 100 armor, and of course shielded. So these guys can be very, very potent, and they even have a passable charge bonus. Most importantly, 76 speed though. Plus, I do think these guys have some of the coolest models in the game. You can see here. Pause them for a second. You can see, look at that, it's fancy schmancy armor, and I really do love the aesthetics of the Horned Ones, but it's just that Rampage mechanic that always turns me off from getting them. Over here you can see I'm trying to flank around with the Chameleon Skinks, get a little too close, and take some fire from my opponent's Rangers. Rangers, of course, are a decent pick because, of course, they are invisible, and their armor's not too important. And they are 50 points cheaper than Thunderers, so plus they're fairly mobile, which for dwarves, which is nice. My opponent has made a tactical sort of box here, and in the center of it, he does have Ungrim Iron Fist, the meanest, craziest dwarf around. And he did bring the Axe of Dargo on him, so he has some pretty ludicrous anti-large stats potentially. Also Deadly Onslaught, of course, and he does have Death Blow, so when he's low on HP, he will be doing a lot more damage. Alongside him, he did bring a Runesmith with all his runes. The Armor Rune is actually, I think, pretty useful against pretty useful against the Lizardmen, because Lizardmen don't have that much armor piercing, especially not on their infantry, so you can potentially hold out really well with that. My opponent also did bring the Hammer of Karak-Draz, which is a debuff to enemy weapon damage and melee attack. Forge Fire, just slight boost to armor piercing. I think this one is a bit useless given his composition. It doesn't really have much armor piercing, but is fairly cheap, I do believe. And then the Master of Groth One Eye, which will make his usually not nearly unbreakable dwarves even more unbreakable. In the back line, my opponent does have a unit of Longbeards with great weapons, as well as Warriors of Dragonfire Pass. His front line is composed of a mix of Longbeards, as you can see out on the edges, as well as the Norgrimlings, Ironbreakers, anchoring everything in position. He's got the Rangers in the back, and then he does have the good old Dragonback Slayers covering 2 cannons, who are already applying a heck of a lot of pressure to poor Zalak over here. Poor Mazdamundi's already dropped by almost 1400 HP at this point. You can also see my Chameleon Skinks are taking some fire, though now my opponent has changed his targeting out to the Skink Cohort. You can see the Skinks because and the Kroxigors, because they're so much faster than the core units of Star Warriors, are horribly outpacing my Star Warriors, so they're going to be engaging prematurely. And here I make a massive mistake, and I push my Skinks forward in front of a bunch of Norgling's Iron Breakers. What I should have done here is use the Croxigors as a tanking tool. You can see the Skinks immediately lose about half their HP, and that's just a total disaster for me. These Skinks will not stick around for very long at all. When Lizardman does start popping his runes over here, you can see I'm trying to flank around with his lack, just to kind of get clear of all this damage. The Skinks do push in to help the Croxigors, and the Croxigors will tear through Longbeards very, very efficiently. It's mostly just a problem that they really won't deal with. They won't really deal with Slayers very well. Now that my Star Warriors are pushing into the fray, they are moving pretty quickly. You can see I keep using the Bastillon on back for a little bit. You can see the Croxigors are in there now. Curse of the Midnight Wind has gone down to debuff all of these guys. And the Croxigors, though, are being hit by Rune of Wrath and Ruin, which I think is a little bit of a waste, because honestly, big units don't tend to take that much damage from Runes of Wrath and Ruin. In the meantime, I'm casting Ruination of Cities here in the center, and it just plows through all these units. Now, one of the problems with Ruination of Cities, as I mentioned before, is that it is random. Over here on the sides, you can see the Horn ones have jumped in, and they are definitely slicing and dicing their way through these enemy troops. These Longbeards are definitely going down in droves. And so are these Longbeards over here. They're really not having the best of times against the Horn ones. My opponent is trying to pick away at the Bastillon, which is okay, I don't really care. I do drop a net over here to keep the Dragonback Slayers off of Mazdamundi and just kind of waddle away. I love how he's got the little totems kind of swaying in his back as he's just marching away, and just ignoring these Dragonback Slayers, and I'm going to start peppering them down with the Chameleon Skinks. You can see my opponent has noticed and is applying some nasty pressure to me. Here I do push the Bastillon through, just bypassing the Longbeards, getting into my opponent's backline, and you can see the Croxigors are getting hit by Revification Crystals, so they're getting some decent HP in. Unfortunately, the Horn ones have gotten kind of pincered here between the Warriors of the Dragonfire Pass and the Longbeards and all that, so they're starting to take some nasty hurt. I do get a banishment off. Now the problem is that my first banishment actually cancelled because I tried to chain off banishment followed by a Ruination of Cities, which was a huge mistake. For those of you who don't know, if you cast a second spell while the first one is still casting, you will that spell will simply not cast. As you can see though, the Horn ones are still not actually begun rampaging, which is really good for me. They have very high baseline HP, I do believe well over 5,000. We can try to check real quick. They have almost 5,400 HP, which is a lot for cavalry. It's significantly more than the vast majority of cavalry. Fortunately, you can see Ungrim definitely does not like Mazdamundi and is trying to lay the smackdown on him over here. He's getting hit with all sorts of debuffs. Basically, Mazdamundi right now is useless, and he really needs to get out of dodge before he suffers an unfortunate death. Over here, though, you can see the Horn ones have finally gotten caught by the angry Slayers, and they've started rampaging. Actually, I do believe there are some Slayers here trying to trickle in. You can see them over there running around, a bunch of crazy loony dwarves. And the backline is kind of compromised for my opponent. There's not much of a backline. You can see these Horn ones are picking apart fleeing units. I want them to push all these units off the field for good, because of course dwarves do have a tendency to bounce right back and be a pain in the rear later. You can see these Rangers have already come back online, or being a nuisance. So I do push Lord Mazdamundi over here, just plowing through these Warriors of Dragonfire Pass, applying some pressure, but immediately do start taking some nasty hurt from the Slayers, and I'm going to be forced to withdraw him out of this conflict as well. Horn ones are definitely struggling. Their melee attack's good, but it's not that amazing, so they're definitely not going to have the easiest of time against the 52 melee defense there. You can see another Ruination of Cities is going down. I'm kind of hoping it spreads out in these sorts of directions. It doesn't really go in the directions I want it to, but it doesn't really matter. Most of the the units effects doesn't really bother me too much. It's okay. It is what it is. Bastillon's still doing some damage. Getting a kill here and there. It does have a bonus against infantry. It's not a terrible infantry killer with its armor piercing and all that. Do try to get on top of the cannons, and here I may definitely make a bit of a mistake. I'd have popped Apotheosis, but my opponent hits me with Rune of Wrath and Ruin. He's just trying to mobilize me, keep me in place. You can see my speed is down to 5. Basically, Mazdamundi can't move. And these Slayers are just surrounding him, and so the things are looking very dire here. Mazdamundi's just getting chopped to bits by a whole bunch of angry Slayers. Unfortunately, my opponent does seem to have kind of messed up his targeting a little bit, loses track with the Slayers. And what I'm trying to do here is I'm just trying to force path Mazdamundi out at all costs. And I'm going to push the Chameleon Skinks into the fray fairly shortly. You can see the Horn ones have actually routed. These Croxigors are pushing in, and I do drop a net of Mintog just to keep the Dragonback Slayers off of me and give Mazdamundi a chance to disengage. He still has 700 HP, so I definitely do not want to lose him. The Horn ones over here do plow into the back of the Longbeards, having routed off and shattered a whole bunch of other units. And now I'm going to be able to collapse on my opponent's backline and really start applying pressure to some of these units like the Longbeards and that sort of stuff. Or not the Longbeards, the Iron Breakers and that sort of stuff. You can see I do dive in on the Dragonback Slayers with the Horn ones because they're on top of the cannons. And at this point I don't care. I'm just trying to put everything out of commission. I don't want a single cannon to get us any shots on Lord Mazdamundi, because at this point that could be game. You can see over here the Bastillon is fighting against Hungrim Iron Fist, and it just pushes into him there. He's getting poisoned, of course, and it's just stomping on him, knocking him all over the place. Definitely Bastillon is having none of it. It's a pretty awesome looking unit. Definitely adorable there. And Ungrim is definitely not having the best of times. He's being manhandled pretty heavily. Unfortunately, the Starch Warriors with their less than inspiring melee stats are definitely not doing the best jobs at cutting him down. And the Bastillon isn't quite able to kill him. It's definitely struggling a little bit there. You can see the backline in the meantime for my opponent is collapsing. The Dragonback Slayers are getting sliced and diced by the Chameleon Skinks, who aren't really meant for melee, but at this point they're out of ammo. Horn ones over here are rampaging. They're still doing quite a bit of hurt. They can obviously the Slayers are still fairly vulnerable. They only have 32 melee defense to get this 40.1 melee attack. These guys have actually already gained a chevron, and so they'll definitely be able to apply some pressure to the Dragonbacks. Over here, you can see the Longbeards are routing. Definitely, my opponent's army is starting to collapse. You can see Norgliming's Iron Breakers over there starting to break, which definitely means that things are going very grim if even Iron Breakers are breaking. Over here, Ungrim is definitely not having the best of time of it, but he is sticking around. He's staying in the fight, and it does look like my Starch Warriors are more focused on the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass than they are on finishing off Ungrim. In the meantime, though, the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass do get terror routed off by the presence of I guess the presence of the Bastillon a second ago, and Ungrim does finally go down and getting him smacked down by the angry Crocscores. We're actually still fairly healthy. The Crocscores have definitely been doing some major work there. You can see the Slayers over here still around and kicking, but at this point my opponent's army does shatter to army losses. You can see these Chameleon Skinks did very little. I wasn't really able to get them to shooting because they were getting blocked all the time. Of course, doors are very short, and so it's hard to shoot over them. And you can see over here the Slayers finally do go down, mobbed from all sides by a horde of angry Sarge Warriors and all that sort of stuff. So, Pyrrhic victory, and for the forces of the Lizardmen. Now, first and foremost, I did make a few major mistakes in that game. The first was throwing the Skinks into the fray way too soon. I should have let the Crocscores soak up the Tassel charges from the Norgliming's Iron Breakers. But the problem was that I was trying to get the Skinks in first so that they'd break up the enemy charge defense, allowing Crocscores to get their full charge bonus. The second problem was that I did try to cast Banishment, followed up immediately by Ruination of Cities with Lord Mazdamundi, which meant I didn't get, which meant the cooldown for Banishment reset, but I lost the charge for Banishment, which really sucks. I only got one charge of Banishment, which did a lot of damage, but it would have been nice to get both. For my units, the Sarge Warriors did perform pretty well. I do believe that in a straight-up one-to-one fight, Sarge Warriors will eventually beat Longbeards. They do have significantly higher HP, or a good bit higher HP. They also have pretty good armor at 60 against the Longbeards' fairly low armor-piercing values. I think the Longbeards only have like 32 weapon strength, so the Longbeards aren't really that great at chopping down the Sarge Warriors. And the Sarge Warriors do have okay AP, even though they're not an armor-piercing unit, so they will eventually kind of hack through the Longbeards through RNG and attrition. So they definitely performed an okay job there. The Skinks did absolutely terrible, but this was a really bad matchup for them. They really couldn't do very much against these sorts of units. The Horn ones performed somewhat situationally well. These Horn ones were kind of chasing off fleeing units, which was a really great thing for me. It meant that I got rid of a lot of the Rangers and I got rid of a lot of the fleeing Longbeards and didn't have to deal with them later. Though perhaps it wasn't the most cost-efficient use of them. These guys do cost 1,400. They're definitely an expensive unit. The other unit of Horn ones, though, got rampaged and cut down in due order, so that was really rough. The Bastillon with the Verification Crystal was very useful. It actually dueled Ungrim for a little bit and did some nasty damage to him, which was pretty cool. It's definitely no pushover. And Ungrim, of course, doesn't have the best of melee defense. He's got pretty crazy armor. He's got pretty crazy armor. He's got pretty crazy bonus against large and armor piercing and all that sort of stuff. But he's not the best against the Bastillon, sort of just knocking him over and landing some nasty hits on him. And the Bastillon, of course, does have armor piercing. The Crocscores, I really do think were kind of the MVPs of that match, though, anchoring the flanks and kind of caving in my opponent's defenses. Yeah, definitely. Lord Mazdamundi, I got some great use out of Net, Apotheosis, and even Curse from the Midnight Wind right off the bat. I definitely got some pretty massive value out of a lot of his spells. I thought they were very useful. My biggest disappointment there was, I think, my use of the Chameleon Skinks, especially this one unit over here, because I didn't really utilize them at all to their full potential. I didn't even get all their ammo off. I should have been trying to focus on the Dragonback Slayers with both of them and been much more on top of that, and probably use them to pursue off enemy troops once they fled. Instead, I kind of just trying to focus on. I actually forget which units I was telling these guys to focus on, but regardless, they didn't really get much done. So that was a major mistake on my part. For my opponent, well, the Norgliming's Iron Breakers raked in a bunch of kills, but as we remember, that was probably a lot of that was Skinks, so it's not that impressive. The Longbeards did okay. They're definitely not a bad holding choice against dinos because they're immune to psychology. And they're very tanky, high melee defense, and that's basically all you really need to hold out against dinosaurs reasonably well. Longbeards with great weapons didn't get too much. I thought it was an interesting pick that my opponent decided to bring Warriors of Dragonfire Pass, honestly. I suppose he was trying to get some synergy with the Dragonback Slayers, maybe, and their kind of incendiary buff, but I I do think a second unit of Longbreeds with weapons, if he was able to kind of squeeze that in there, would have probably been a bit better of a choice than the Warriors Dragon Fire Pass, just to apply pressure to the high armor units like the Saurus Warrior, or higher armor units like Saurus Warriors or Crocsagores, even though they aren't necessarily anti-large. Gremlins, Ironbreakers, though, held like champs. The Rangers got routed fairly quickly, which was rough. Kind of pushed through my opponent's line and terror-routed him. And then the cannons did some nasty work early on, but definitely I think my opponent being stuck with that sort of defensive geometry hurt him, because I was able to collapse in from all sides and just kind of slowly but surely take him apart. So definitely, nonetheless, good game to my opponent here. Kaiser played 43. You can't see the batch came right down to the bitter end. Only 112 Dawi remaining and 289 Cyrus, so definitely not the most... definitely not some one-sided stomping. It's definitely a bit rough. But yeah, good game to my opponent. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. If you have any comments, criticism, any questions about the game or anything like that, be sure to post those down as well, and I'll respond as soon as I can. As usual, guys, I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.